Hello everyone. I'm incredibly sorry for the enormous break between videos. University exams, mental health and other personal issues really halted my video making. I hope you can understand my predicament. Furthermore, I will plan out the part 2 of the Ranking Champions video as soon as this one comes out. As with my amazing, unmatched video planning, I started writing this video early last month and didn't consider it would take this long to come out and delay all of the videos in the process. So I apologise if videos take longer to come out than usual. With that, in today's video, I'm going to rank the top 5 drivers in F1 history from every single continent. I will be considering both pure peak performance and their success in Formula 1, so there is a balance between drivers who achieved a lot and drivers who maybe didn't achieve many wins or championships but proved themselves to be at the top level at motorsport. I will go in order from the least talented to the most talented continent, and just to clarify, the continents I will use in this video are Africa, Asia, North America, Oceania, South America and Europe. Also, considering Pingu or any other Antarctic animal/person has never entered a Formula 1 race, I will not be counting Antarctica in this list. And like I say in all of my ranking or debate videos, as this is a ranking, the order in which I put the drivers is subjective, and I'm only counting their performances in Formula 1 itself. Please try to keep a healthy debate in the comments. I absolutely respect and enjoy sensible conversation, but try and keep it to that level of conversation. Lastly, the amount of images I used in this video is going to be sparing, considering me having recently just found out about the Aidan Millward saga. Basically, he's a much bigger and definitely better F1 and motor racing YouTuber who got all of his videos taken down for copyrighted images he nicks off the internet without proper consideration. The exact same thing I have done for the last 3 months. So, with that, and this video's extreme length, I'll say what he always says: treat this video like a podcast and maybe do something else at the same time as listening to this video. Maybe sit in the garden with a nice glass of orange juice, or maybe knit a butterfly. Anyway, I'm waffling now. With that, let's get into the video. Dave Charlton was born in the UK, but competed as a South African during his time in Formula 1. He entered 14 races between 1965 and 1975 and started 11 of those. From his 11 starts, he finished a mere 4 races, although most of the non-finishes were down to mechanical problems. His first race finish was a non-classified finish in the 1967 South African Grand Prix. The reason he wasn't classified, despite still running at race end, was because he was 17 laps down. His second race finish came in 1970 when he got 12th, again in his home race in South Africa, although his engine had died with 7 laps to go, hence why he was still classified. It would take 4 more years for the South African to get another race finish, again in his home race, this time in 19th, again 7 laps down. In his final F1 race finish, Charlton finished 14th and 2 laps down. It's clear that he wasn't the greatest of drivers, but there really is a lack of abundance of drivers from the African continent who did races outside of their home race and got good results. Ian was the brother of Jody Scheckter, and he was far less successful than Jody too. His career lasted only 4 years, picking up a few races here and there for privateer teams, Hesketh Racing and Frank Williams Racing Cars, the predecessor to Williams. By the end of 1976, he had only entered 6 races, finishing 2, one in 12th place and the other in 13th. However, he signed full-time for March in 1977. He got 10th in the Netherlands and 11th in Spain, but retired or was not classified in every other race. His lack of performance could be attributed to the fact that March was running 5 cars throughout the 1977 season, unable to provide any adequate resources to any of their drivers in their team due to the extensive amount of cars. Scheckter's F1 career ended abruptly when he was denied entry into Japan for the last race of 1977, mainly due to Japan's objections to the South African apartheid regime and the fact that Ian only had a tourist visa. Jody, his brother, faced no such issues because he had a working visa passport and not a tourist one, so why didn't he just get one of those then? John Love was born in southern Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe, and competed as a Rhodesian and also as a driver from the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland during his F1 career. His F1 stint lasted between 1962 to 1972, when he contested in the South African Grand Prix every year except 1964, when the race wasn't on, when he entered the Italian Grand Prix instead, and 1966, when the race was a non-championship race. His first few races showed no major results, but his day of days came in the 1967 race. After the other leaders fell off the road due to issues, Love found himself in the lead on lap 61 with 19 laps left. However, as the end approached, he suffered a misfire, which made him take a precautionary pit stop to take on more fuel, and he lost the lead on lap 73, but held on to take second place and the first podium of his career, and became the second African driver to get on a podium in F1 history. His remaining outings in the South African race bore no more points finishes, so the Rhodesian ended his F1 career with 6 race finishes, a podium finish with second place, a next best result of 2 8th places and 2 9th places, a 16th place, 3 DNFs and a DNQ. Tony Maggs had a fairly short F1 career spanning from 1961 till 1965. He became the first African driver to get points in an F1 race in the 1962 Dutch Grand Prix, where he got 5th place. Then in the French Grand Prix that year, he became the first African driver to appear on the F1 podium when he finished 2nd. Then in his home Grand Prix, he finished 3rd, which meant there were now 2 African podium finishes in F1 history, and both of them were Tony Maggs. These results, plus a 6th place at Aintree, got him 7th in the drivers' standings with 13 points. His 3rd and final career podium came in 1963, again in France, but this time in Reims, not in Rouen, like in the 1962 race. He got 8th in the drivers' standings in 1963 as he achieved a 5th place in Monaco and a 6th place in Italy. In 1964, he achieved 2 more points finishes at the Nordschleife and at Zeltweg for the first Austrian Grand Prix with 6th and 4th respectively. In 1965, he entered the first race of the season in South Africa, but following his involvement in an accident in a regional race which killed a young spectator, he retired from motor racing to concentrate on his business ventures. Maggs was clearly very talented, and with a bit more luck, he could have won a race in Formula 1. Jody is by far the best African driver in F1 history. He is the only African driver to get a fastest lap, a win, or Drivers' Championship. He made his F1 debut in the 1972 United States Grand Prix, finishing 9th, 1 lap down. After a 1973 season, which saw him only finish 1 out of the 5 races he entered, he moved from McLaren to Tyrrell for 1974. He picked up his first podium in the Belgian Grand Prix at the Neval-Borla circuit, and followed this up with a 2nd in the following race in Monaco. He went 1 better in Sweden at Anderstorp, beating teammate Patrick Depailler to the win by 0.38 seconds, which coincidentally was the same margin by which Depailler has beaten Scheckter to pole in that race. He picked up his 2nd win in Brands Hatch, along with a 2nd place on the fearsome Nordschleife circuit, a 3rd place in Monza, a 4th place in Dijon-Prenois, and 2 5th places in Jarama and Zandvoort. These point-scoring races got him 3rd in the drivers' standings. After a less successful 1975 season, in which he only won 1 race, his home race in Kyalami, 1976 saw him get 3rd in the drivers' standings, getting his 2nd win in 3 years at the Anderstorp circuit, driving the 6-wheel Tyrrell for the majority of the year. Along with his win, he got 4 second places in a very consistent season for Jody. He switched over to the Walter Wolf racing outfit for 1977, kicking off with a bang in the first race in Argentina, winning on the team's first appearance in Formula 1. He got 2 more wins in Monaco and Canada, along with 6 further podium finishes, which allowed him to get 2nd in the Drivers' Championship behind a runaway Niki Lauda. For 1978, Wolf dropped off a cliff in performance, and Scheckter had his first winless season since 1973, scraping 4 podiums as the team chopped and changed between a total of 5 chassis to try and stay competitive as ground effect really took off, or should I say, glued on. He moved to Ferrari for 1979, and after a relatively sluggish start to the season, after the 5th round in Spain, Jody stood 5th in the driver's standings, but then won 2 races on the bounce in Zolder and Monaco to go top of the standings by a considerable margin. After a 7th place in France, he racked up consistent point-scoring finishes until the 4th from last round in Zandvoort, which saw Jody pick up 2nd. Then, in Monza, he won. Following a 4th place in the 2nd-to-last race in Canada, the title battle was an anticlimactic one going into the final race at Watkins Glen, as Scheckter had already wrapped up the title due to the way the point system worked back then. Because only a certain amount of results counted towards the championship, only the best 4 results from the first 7 races and the best 4 results from the last 8 races counted towards the championship. Because Gilles Villeneuve, Scheckter's main title rival, had had such a strong start to the second half of the season, already picking up 4 second-place finishes, it meant that Gilles could only better his points tally by 3 in the last race, even if he won, because the first place would replace one of his 4 second places. This is exactly what happened, so despite Jody retiring during the race and Gilles winning, he only bettered his points tally by 3. Personally, although I understand this point system of best results existed for around 40 years because they wanted to mitigate reliability issues, I'm so glad it's not a thing today. Although I was never alive to see how it played out across the season, I'd assume especially with the lack of live TV graphics, but it was very hard to keep up with the maths live in races. Anyway, back to Scheckter's career. He won the title, becoming the first and only African driver to win a Formula 1 Drivers' Championship, but in 1980, his title fence wasn't very robust. As ground effect was beginning to take its stranglehold on Formula 1, teams were trying to make their cars' floors as long and wide as possible to make the Venturi tunnels bigger, and therefore increase the sucking effect they had on the car. However, Schechter's Ferrari team had an Achilles heel. Their flat 12 engine was unusually big, which meant they had to sacrifice downforce from the Venturi tunnels to place the engine in the car. Along with the lack of downforce, the engine was slow and unreliable, which culminated to create Ferrari's worst season in its history. Modern fans may cite 2020 as Ferrari's worst season, as it finished 6th in the Constructors' Championship with only a handful of podiums. Other, more knowledgeable fans may point to the early 90s, as the team plummeted following the departure of Alain Prost, as across 1992 and 93, the team got a mere 5 podiums and 2 fourth-place finishes in the Constructors' standings. 1980, though, was much worse. Schechter and Villeneuve couldn't muster a single podium finish, scoring 8 points with 3 fifth-place finishes and 2 sixths. Schechter even failed to qualify at the penultimate round in Canada, such was the car's underperformance. Schechter promptly retired at year's end, and there has never been an African driver in F1 since. Maybe with the proposal to get Kyalami back on the calendar, with the project involving Jody himself, we could see more African drivers in the future, although I have an unpopular opinion. I don't think it would be a good idea to race at Kyalami. It's a nice circuit to hot lap, but overtaking-wise, I don't think we'd see any good racing on it. As cliche as they have become now, I'd prefer a street circuit, which can be engineered to create overtaking as long as you don't hand the pen to Herman Tilke and tell him to create as many 90-degree corners as possible. Or there's an opportunity to go to another country, maybe like Morocco, like F1 did in 1958, or to a place like Rwanda, where they are trying to become the Singapore of Africa. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked again. So in conclusion for this section, Jody Scheckter is the best African driver in F1 history, to the surprise of no one. Aguri Suzuki was a pioneer of Japanese success in F1. After a couple of seasons, winning in Japanese racing series, and an unsuccessful run in International F3000, Aguri joined La Rousse in late 1988 for the Japanese Grand Prix, where he finished the race in 16th place, 3 laps down. He then moved to Zak Speed for 1989, where he failed to pre-qualify for any of the 16 races. He then moved back to La Rousse for 1990, and after points finishes in Silverstone and Jerez, Suzuki's day of days came in his home race at Suzuka, where after qualifying 10th, he capitalised on many insignificant crashes and incidents in front of him to claim the first podium for an Asian driver in F1 history with 3rd place. Fun fact, this podium was also the last time a European driver failed to appear on a Formula 1 podium, as the Brazilian Benetton duo of Nelson Piquet and Roberto Moreno finished 1-2, along with Aguri in 3rd. Aguri then scored points of the 1991 season opener in Phoenix with 6th place, but after an unsuccessful move to footwork for the 1992 and 93 seasons, he only competed in 1 race in 1994, the Pacific Grand Prix, in which he retired. He then came back in 1995 with Ligier, where he scored his first points in over 4 years with 6th place. He retired from F1 at the end of 1995, having achieved more than all Japanese drivers before him, including Satoru Nakajima, the village bicycle of Formula 1 for any team wanting to sign Honda engines. Suzuki continued racing in Japan until he was 40, then he retired. There were many candidates for his 5th place spot, including the likes of Birabongsi Banadej of Siam, now Thailand, and even Yuki Tsunoda. But in my opinion, Aguri Suzuki comes out just on top of these two. Takuma Sato was labelled as a kamikaze driver during his F1 stint, but he was undoubtedly very rapid. After winning British Formula 3, the Macau GP, and the Masters of Formula 3 in 2001, he joined Jordan for 2002, having a lacklustre season until the final race at Suzuka, where he got 2 points from a 5th place finish. He sat out the majority of 2003, but following Jacques Villeneuve leaving BAR early, he stepped in for the final race of the season, again in Suzuka, and got 6th. He was given a full-time seat at BAR in 2004, and following a very shaky start to the season, following the 8th race in Canada, he was on 4 points when his teammate Jenson Button was on 44. His season kicked on from there, however, as he got his first podium in the United States Grand Prix at Indy, a track he would build a great affinity with later in his career. He then scored points in 6 of the last 7 races of the season to finish the Drivers' Championship in 8th. He struggled a lot in 2005, getting outscored by Jenson 37-1 after Jenson put on a storming run in the second half of the season. With the prospect of Sato being off the grid for 2006, Honda commissioned Aguri Suzuki to create a Honda B team for which 2 Japanese drivers would drive. Sato was obviously selected as the number 1 driver alongside the hapless Yuji Ide, who drove for 4 rounds before having his FIA super license revoked. Sato performed unspectacularly in the worst car on the grid, unable to get into the points. In the 2007 season, he and teammate Anthony Davidson performed admirably as Anthony was running in third place before he encountered the groundhog, which don't provide him with much aerodynamic advantage at all when he hit it. So Davidson came into the pits, dropped out the points, and Sato stayed in sixth, holding up the McLaren of Fernando Alonso. That was all in the Canadian Grand Prix, by the way. My awful script writing just didn't mention that bit. This, however, was the last of the point scoring results that season, and he stayed on with Super Aguri for a third season, but the team folded after 4 races without points. Sato couldn't find another drive, so he retired from Formula 1, but there was no doubt he was a rapid driver on his day, something he proved by winning 2 Indy 500s well into his 40s, as he became an oval specialist in IndyCar. He has a mixed reputation among F1 fans. Some saw him as an error-prone nutjob, while others saw him as determined. Kamui Kobayashi joined F1 in late 2009 after winning GP2 Asia. He replaced Timo Glock at Toyota after the German was injured in a qualifying crash, and in his first 2 races in Formula 1, he bore much fruit. He defended from Jenson Button in Brazil when Jenson needed to overtake him to win his driver's title. Eventually, Kobayashi finished 9th and outside the points, but in the next race, and the last race of the season, Kobayashi finished 6th in the points after again battling with Jenson Button in Abu Dhabi. He was initially planned to race for Toyota on a full-time basis in 2010, but the team pulled out of Formula 1 due to the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 that was still affecting Asian companies, hence Honda's pullout a year earlier. Instead of staying on with Toyota, Kamui joined BMW Sauber for 2010, although the team was only BMW in name as they were powered by Ferrari engines. Kobayashi retired from the 5 of the first 6 races of the season. Then at Turkey, he picked up his first points position with 10th, then picked up 7 more points scoring positions, outscoring teammates Pedro De La Rota and Nick Heidfeld by 32-12. For 2011, Kamui stayed with Sauber and got a flying start for the season, scoring a point streak from the second round in Malaysia until 7th in Canada, getting a 5th place in Monaco, alongside 2 7th places and 3 consecutive 10 places. He only scored 3 more points finishes in the rest of the season, including in both of the last 2 races in Abu Dhabi and Brazil. Kobayashi outscored rookie teammate Sergio Perez 30-14. Sergio remained Kamui's teammate in 2012, and Kamui had his best season of his F1 career. He scored points 9 times out of 20 races, including his only podium of his career in his home race in Suzuka. He also got a 4th, a 5th, and 2 6th places amongst 3 9th places and a 10th. Sergio outscored Kamui by 6 points, courtesy of 3 podiums, including 2 second places, and Sergio later said that Kamui was the best teammate he'd ever had. Then, in 2014, after he took a year out to be a Ferrari's development driver, he joined Caterham. Caterham was a terrible team that year, and he didn't score any points, but he nearly scored points in Monaco that year. But Jules Bianchi rammed him out of the way and made him get floor damage, which meant he couldn't actually get any points that race, something I still hold against Bianchi to this day. Alex came into F1 off the back of the 3rd place finish in F2 in 2018, joining Toro Rosso, putting in admirable performances in races like China, where he recovered from starting last to finishing in the points. After his mid-season promotion to Red Bull, the gulf between him and Max wasn't as big as the gaping chasm between Max and Pierre in the first half of the season, and he stayed on at Red Bull for 2020, but failed to deliver on the potential to get closer to Max, only getting 2 podiums when Max won multiple races. This meant that he was left out of either of the Red Bull-backed teams for 2021, so instead he competed in DTM, in which he came 6th. For 2022, Alex came back to F1 with Williams, still backed by Red Bull, outperforming Nicholas Latifi. But to be fair to Alex, outperforming Latifi is about as easy as beating Ayrton Senna in a who can date women who are of age contest, or beating Tom Price in a who can not turn the body of a marshal into a set of human Jenga contest. Enough with the Latifi bashing. Alex performed well in what was the worst car on the grid. His start to 2023 has been good, and had he not crashed out of contention in Australia, he could have scored a decent points haul. We'll have to see if he can continue his good form to be able to usurp the number 1 driver on this list. Danny Kvyat's F1 career story is a massive what-if. There are so many unfortunate circumstances that stopped his career, and most of these circumstances relate to Max Verstappen. Even despite his unceremonious F1 departures, yes, that's departures in plural, I think Kvyat is the best Asian driver in F1 history. Kvyat entered F1 in 2014 off the back of winning the GP3 title, having been told by Helmut Marko that whoever finished higher out of him and Carlos Sainz would get the F1 seat. Danny won the title while Carlos finished a lowly 10th over 100 points behind, so Kvyat was part of a relatively experienced John-Eric Verne at Toro Rosso in 2014. He got points on his debut with a 9th place finish in Melbourne, but that was his highest finished all year, as he lost out in a teammate battle 22-8 on points to Verne. Although he had shown promise, So when Sebastian Vettel left Red Bull for Ferrari in late 2014, it was Kvyat who was selected to fill the German shoes, and he performed well in the first Red Bull in 7 years that didn't win a single race. He peaked with a second place in Hungary and finished 3 points ahead of his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, who at this point was already a three-time race winner. His 2016 didn't get off to a great start, as he didn't start the season opener in Melbourne for the second year in a row. Then in the second race in Bahrain, he qualified a lowly 15th and only recovered to 7th place in the race. In the next race in China, he would achieve a podium, but also got involved in an incident with Sebastian Vettel, which caused the German world champion to lay Kvyat a torpedo. Looking back on the incident, it wasn't Danny's fault. There was ample room when Vettel went for the move. It was in fact Kimi who squeezed Vettel and Kvyat to the inside a bit too much, causing contact. Nonetheless, Kvyat is still labelled the torpedo by many F1 fans today. All he needed in the next weekend in his home race in Sochi was a good performance without any controversy. Oh, for fuck's sake, Danny. And it had to be with Seb as well. The lines uttered by Seb as he was planted in the barrier are still remembered today. Crash, somebody hit me in the fucking rear, turn 2, then somebody hit me in the fucking rear again, turn 3. For fuck's sake, honestly, what are we doing here? Although I defended Kvyat for the China incident, he was 100% at fault for this one. Outbraked himself twice and hit Seb both times. After the incident, Danny only finished 15th, but more importantly, Red Bull had lost patience with Kvyat and promptly sent him back down to Toro Rosso and promoted Max Verstappen to replace the Russian. We all know how Max performed on debut. However, Danny finished 10th in his first race, back in Toro Rosso, setting fastest lap on lap 53. He scored another 10th in Silverstone and a 9th in Singapore, but those were his only points finishers in a year which had promised but laid shattered and broken in front of Danny before it properly got started. He would stay on with Toro Rosso in 2017, picking up 4 points, but he was comprehensively outscored by Carlos Sainz Jr. Kvyat had to vacate his seat for the Malaysian and Japanese Grand Prix as Toro Rosso tried French rookie Pierre Gasly in the car. Kvyat was brought back in for the Racing Cota as Carlos Sainz had made an early switch to Renault before the end of the season. It would not be Gasly partnering Danny though, it would be Brendan Hartley, who at this point in his career had achieved lots of success in LMP cars, winning WEC twice and Le Mans in 2017. Kvyat beat Hartley, scoring his last point of the season, but was dropped again for Gasly for the final 3 races of the season. His F1 career was on the ropes, but having been ousted in favour of more promising or newer talent. He became a test driver for Ferrari in 2018, but following the incessant unluckiness and general lack of pace that had befallen Brendan Hartley, the Kiwi was ousted for 2019, and Toro Rosso came crawling back to Danny. He joined the team, and in the first part of the year picked up a handful of points finishes, including an impressive performance and a podium in the chaotic German Grand Prix. Then Pierre Gasly was dropped back down to Toro Rosso after his bad start to the season, and it was between Alex Albon and Kvyat for the Red Bull seat. Looking back on this era of Red Bull, chopping and changing inexperienced drivers in the hope that one of them would get close to Max Verstappen's pace, if they had selected Kvyat to race alongside Max, there's a good chance he would have floundered less than both Pierre and Alex due to his superior experience. However, it was not to be, as Alex, who was selected to take the Red Bull seat for the remainder of 2019. Danny kept his head down and scored points 4 more times, including twice in the last 2 races. He had an average 2020, although there were some high points, including an impressive 4th place in Imola. Another thing to note is that during 2019, Kvyat split up with his girlfriend, Kelly Piquet, with whom he'd had a child. At the start of 2021, she began dating, of all people, Max Verstappen. So not only was Danny's career shagged by Max, but his bird was as well. Danny got outscored 75-32 by teammate Pierre Gasly, although 25 of Pierre's points came from his Monza win. Nonetheless, Kvyat was dropped for 2021 in favour of Yuki Tsunoda, and then he took a reserve driver role at Alpine for 2021 before committing to a career in endurance racing, winning the Russian Endurance Challenge in 2022. And he is currently sitting second in the standings in WEC, although these results obviously don't count towards this ranking. Some people may question why Danny is top of the Asian drivers, despite his performances over his career, but when he was on the pace, he could challenge the best of his teammates. His failures in F1 tended to happen due to being in the right place at the wrong time, aka being in the Red Bull system when Max Verstappen was considered as up-and-coming and not as a bona fide champion. The likeable Mexican Sergio Perez has had an up-and-down Formula 1 career, but his high points have really proven why he's been able to sustain his position on the F1 grid for 12 years now. Perez joined F1 in 2011 driving for Sauber, backed by Carlos Slim, who was one of the richest men in the world at the time, and his first season was a clumsy one. He He scored his first points in Spain, then crashed out in qualifying in Monaco, coming up to the seafront chicane with an impact of 78G. He sat out the rest of the weekend and the following weekend in Canada, then returned to the points again with a season-best 7th 2 races later in Silverstone. After a mid-season low, he scored points in 3 out of the 4 races from the Singapore to India stretch of the season. He totaled 14 points in his rookie year, less than half of teammate Kamui Kobayashi, but he had shown flashes of potential going into 2012. Sergio's 2012 was characterised by inconsistent but good point-scoring finishes. 3 of his 7 point-scoring finishes were podiums, and he finished 11th 5 times, using his 2 second places in Malaysia and Monza to raise his reputation and beat Kobayashi in the standings by 6 points. He could have won in Malaysia if not for a mistake, and following a shock McLaren exit for Lewis Hamilton, Sergio was signed up to the team that had the fastest car in 2012 for the following season. However, a bad decision by higher-ups in the team to scrap the 2012 formula in favour of a completely brand new car design really knocked the team down a peg. Sergio scored points regularly, especially towards the end of the season, but he clashed with teammate Jenson Button after they battled in Bahrain, and Checo lost out to Jenson in the points standings 73-49. He was on his last legs in 2014, with the prospect of being out of F1 if he couldn't perform with his brand new team Force India, as McLaren replaced him with Danish hotshot Kevin Magnussen. He got a season's best 3rd place in Bahrain, but couldn't get consistently high points positions, only finishing in the top 8 on 6 occasions compared to teammate Hulkenberg's impressive 11 top 8s. Nonetheless, Sergio was retained for 2015, and following a mid-season B-Spec car coming in, he went from scoring 11 points in the first 7 races of the season to 67 points in the last 12 races, including a podium in Russia, which he inherited when Kimi and Valtteri decided to have a vodka party at Turn 4 on the final lap. He also outscored Nico Hulkenberg by a respectable 20 points. 2016 was a very consistent year for Sergio. After a shaky start, which saw him fail to score points in the first 3 races, while Nico got a 7th in the opener in Melbourne, Perez went on a mad point-scoring run, only missing out on points in 2 of the remaining 18 races, and that number would have only been 1 if he hadn't had an accident caused by mechanical failure while running 8th. His ultra-consistency saw him beat teammate Nico by 101 to 72 points. For 2017, however, he would have a new teammate, Mercedes protégé Esteban Ocon, who had made his debut for Manor in the second half of 2016. The 2017 season was characterised by major fallings out between Sergio and Esteban due to high-profile crashes on track in both Baku and Spa. Both were still regular point scorers, and they only failed to score points in 5 out of the 40 race entries as a duo. Perez again outscored his teammate, this time 100 to 87. 2018 will be a struggle off-track as the Force India team went into administration and was taken over by a consortium led by Lawrence Stroll, and the team changed its name to Racing Point Force India. Aside from a podium in typically chaotic Baku race and a handful of decent positions, the start of the season was shaky. The team rebrand happened over the summer break, and Sergio went on to score in all but 2 races, those 2 being in Singapore, where he collided with Sergei Sorokin, and in Mexico with a mechanical fault. Perez again outscored Ocon 62-49, and then for 2019, Lance Stroll would become Sergio's teammate. He started the season with an okay run of 3 point scoring finishes in the first 4 races, and then got 2 11ths and 3 12th place finishes, not scoring again until after the summer break, where he picked up 8 top 10 finishes in the final 9 races. He had now outperformed a 4th different teammate in his career, beating Lance by 52-21 points. Sergio will be going into his 7th season with a Silverstone-based F1 team, and for the first time in his career, he was given a car that could challenge the top teams on its day. He performed admirably, finishing in the points in 11 out of 13 races with numerous top 5s and 6s. He achieved 2nd place in a wet Turkish race, whilst teammate Stroll faltered after starting on pole. But his day of days came in the 2nd race in Bahrain, around the outer circuit of the Sakir circuit. He fell to the back at the start following a collision between him, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. Then, for a mix of good luck and good driving, he won his first race after 190 starts, 8 years after the win that slipped him away from him in Sepang. He was out of the drive for 2021 as Racing Point turned to 4-time champion Sebastian Vettel to unceremoniously replace the man who kept the team alive. Sergio's stellar season, which saw him claim 4th in the driver's standings, 50 points clear of Lance, prompted Red Bull to look outside of their junior ranks for a replacement for the underperforming Alex Albon. Sergio was signed as a clear number 2 driver, designed to assist Max Verstappen with a title challenge. Sergio got his 2nd career win in Baku and did a great job defending against Lewis Hamilton in Turkey and in Abu Dhabi to help his teammate win the title, and there was clear cohesion and understanding between Sergio and Max as to their team roles. In 2022, Sergio mounted an early season title battle, got his first pole position in Jeddah, and in Monaco won after a controversial crash in qualifying that was rumoured to be found out as intentional by Max and Christian Horner at a later date. His title battle fizzled out, and he only won one more race in Singapore that season. His start of the 2023 season has been inconsistent. He currently sits second in the driver's standings behind his teammate Max Verstappen with 2 wins, 2 second places and a 5th. It looks as if his title challenge will fizzle out in the mid to late part of the season as it did in 2022. And to his fellow number 2 driver, to a generational talent, Valtteri Bottas. Overall, Sergio is a very fast driver, especially on race day, but lacks the talent to become a bona fide championship winner. He is undoubtedly fantastic in areas such as tyre saving and defending for his teammate Max Verstappen, but otherwise struggles with consistency compared to the Dutchman. Dan Gurney was a pioneer of motorsport. He was the first F1 driver to wear a full-face helmet in 1968, before even the likes of Jackie Stewart and Jochen Rindt. He also pioneered the Gurney flap, a design fitted to cars' wings designed to reduce the lift-drag ratio. Outside of his non-driving revelations, Gurney started racing in F1 in 1959 for none other than Scuderia Ferrari, making his debut in the French Grand Prix, although he retired on lap 19 with radiator failure. In his second race, in Germany at the Avus circuit, Gurney came second in the only F1 race ever to be held over 2 heats. He followed this up with a 3rd place in Monsanto and a 4th place in Monza. This meant he finished 7th in the Drivers' Championship despite only finishing 3 races. His 1960 season was one to forget, as Gurney failed to score any points while teammates Graham Hill and Joe Bonnier scored 8 combined. Dan moved to Porsche in 1961, racking up 3 second places in France, Italy and his home race in the United States respectively, and a 5th and 6th place elsewhere to finish 4th in the drivers' standings. He stayed with Porsche for 1962, taking his first win at the French Grand Prix in Rouen. He only finished 2 more races in the points, getting 3rd at the Nürburgring after taking pole position, and a 5th place in the United States. 1963 saw Gurney switch to Brabham, taking 3 podiums in Belgium, the Netherlands and South Africa, along with a 5th and 6th place at France and Mexico, respectively. 1964 was a fast but inconsistent year for Dan, winning twice in France and Mexico, but only getting 1 other point outside of those 2 wins in Spa. This meant that he had the same points tally as the previous season with 19, however finished 1 place lower in 6th rather than 5th in the drivers' standings. The 1965 season saw Gurney pick up some good late form and results, with 5 consecutive podiums in the final 5 races, with 3 third places and 2 second places. Dan finished 4th in that year's standings on 25 points. For 1966, Dan created his own team, Anglo-American Racers, and a shaky first season meant he only got 4 points from 2 5th place finishes. 1967 saw Dan retire from all but 2 races. However, in those 2 races, he won at Spa and got 3rd in Canada. The Spa win would turn out to be Dan's final F1 victory. He got 3 points from the 4th place at Watkins Glen in 1968. A 38-year-old Gurney sat out 1969 before returning to F1 part-time in 1970, scoring his final point in the French Grand Prix at the fearsome Charade circuit with 6th place. He didn't finish either of his other 2 races that year and retired at year's end. He was an innovator and had skills in many racing series outside of F1, winning endurance racing, NASCAR, USAC road racing and Indy. He survived being a frontrunner in the killer years of Formula 1 and watched his contemporaries like Jim Clark and Taffy Von Trips pass away in an accident that could have so easily been him. After starting car racing aged 18, doing junior series in Europe, Japan and the USA, Jacques Villeneuve moved to kart and won his first race at Road America before winning the series outright in 1995. He moved over to Williams in F1 for 1996, partnering Damon Hill. He shocked the F1 world by getting pole and nearly winning his first race in Australia, although an oil issue meant he dropped back 40 seconds from Damon to finish second. At the second race in Interlagos, he qualified 3rd, more than a second off Hill, and then retired on lap 26 after he spun off. He followed us up with a second in Buenos Aires and his first win at the Nürburgring. He went out of the next race in Imola, although he was classified after a collision with John Lacey. The next race at Monaco is known in F1 circles as the chaotic race with many retirements. Jacques again qualified more than a second off of Hill, but in the race got turned into at Mirabeau by the 40 of Luca Badoa, damaging his suspension, forcing him to retire from the race. After this result, however, he achieved 7 podiums for the next 7 races, with wins in Silverstone in Hungary, second places in Canada, France and Spa, and at the latter of which he achieved his second pole position of the year, and third places in Catalonia and Hockenheim. Going into the last 3 races of the season, he was a mere 13 points behind Hill with 30 available. Hill spun off after hitting some dodgily placed tyre barriers on one of the chicanes on the Monza circuit early on in the Monza race, but Villeneuve also had issues. After striking a tyre which had fallen from a trackside barrier, he had suspension damage and had to pit for nose damage and a replacement steering wheel, putting him 16th and a lap down. He recovered to 7th outside the points. Villeneuve won in Estoril by 20 seconds to Hill, meaning that going into the last race at Suzuka, if Hill retired and Villeneuve won, Jacques would win the title, becoming the only rookie in history to do so. He got pole, but then got a craptacular start, dropping back to 6th. However, as fate would have it, while Jack was running 4th, a wheel bearing failed, causing his right rear wheel to come off through turns 1 and 2. This handed the title to Hill, but Hill was out of the team for 1997 as the higher-ups at Williams had decided during 1995 they felt he wasn't good enough. This meant that Villeneuve's new teammate was going to be Heinz Ketchup Frentzen, who at the time was a young hotshot just like Jack had been the previous year. Villeneuve outqualified Red Sauce Boy by 1.7 seconds as the Williams duo locked out the front row in Melbourne. An incident caused by Eddie Irvine on lap 1 eliminated Villeneuve from the race, but then he got the pole and win in the next 2 races in Brazil and Argentina just out of spite. He qualified on pole again in Imola, but retired with gearbox failure. An inherent weak track for Jacques, the next race in Monaco didn't go well. His streak of poles ended, and he retired early on from accident damage. Villeneuve won in Spain before crashing at the Wall of Champions during the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. A 4th in France was followed by pole and 2nd win in Silverstone. Schumacher, who had held the championship lead since Imola, finished 2nd in Hockenheim as Villeneuve retired, extending the Germans' championship lead to over 10 points. Villeneuve then won 3 of the next 5 races, scoring 5th places in the other, taking a points lead of 9 points over Schuey. Jacques initially finished 5th in the second-to-last race of Suzuka, but he was racing on appeal for a practice infringement. With the looming threat of a potential ban, he raced cautiously, although as he didn't finish that well, Williams withdrew the appeal, and he was 1 point ahead going in, and he was probably disqualified. They did this so that there would be nothing looming over them in the last race in Jerez. Michael was 1 point ahead going into the final race, and Williams were constantly reminding people of the 1994 race in Adelaide, where Michael intentionally wiped out Damon Hill to win the title, calling for strong action to be taken if this happened again. On the Saturday, Villeneuve, Schumacher and Frentzen lined up 1st, 2nd and 3rd. However, their qualifying times were exactly the same to 1,000ths of a second. As Villeneuve set his time first, he was on pole, followed by Schuey in 2nd and Frentzen in 3rd. The race start saw Schumacher take the lead as Frentzen overtook Jacques, although he let him through on lap 8. Schumacher led most of the first 47 laps, but then on lap 48, it happened. Villeneuve attempted to overtake Michael into Curvers Reisack, but Michael turned in on him deliberately, taking the German out of the race and leaving Jacques' battery only still attached to the car by hanging from its wires. The damage slowed Villeneuve's pace, and on the last lap he was overtaken by both McLarens and was nearly overtaken by Gerhard Berger's Benetton over the line. But Villeneuve didn't know it was Berger behind him. He said that afterwards, if he'd known it was him, then he'd have let him through, as he just needed the 1 point for 6th to win on countback. Jacques was champion. He'd achieved what his dad never had a chance to do. But he would fall from grace in 1998. The exit of Adrian Newey hit Williams hard, and the team slumped to 3rd place in the Constructors. Villeneuve scored points 9 times and got 2 podiums in consecutive races in Germany and Hungary. He amassed only a quarter of the points of the previous year, and during the second half of the season, it was known that Villeneuve would be moving to Tyrrell, which would become BAR in 1999, led by Jacques' manager, Craig Pollock. The team was put together to try and lead the Canadian champion back to the top of Formula 1, and they targeted a 1-2 finish in their first race. The Zip-designed car wasn't zipping around the track, rather it was zipping back into the pits with mechanical issues. Jacques retired from all of the first 11 races of the season, with 7 mechanical failures and 4 crashes. He finished 15th in Spa, then 8th in Monza. He had 2 more mechanical failures at the Nürburgring and Sepang, then he got 9th in the last race in Suzuka. In his team's first season, Jacques finished just 3 races under his own steam, and Ricardo Zonta, his teammate, only finished 7. They finished last in the Constructors' Championship, the only team with no points. Things would have to improve for 2000, and they did. He got 2 points finishes in the first 3 races, with a 4th and a 5th, got another 2 4ths mid-season, and rounded up the season with a 4th, 5th and 6th, getting 17 points and getting 7th in the driver's standings, outscoring teammate Zonta 17-3, although those kind of results are what you'd expect from a champion. 2001 saw just 4 points scoring positions, although 2 of those were podiums in Spain and Germany. He again got 7th in the Drivers' Championship, but things were looking bleak for 2002, as his personal manager, who was also team principal of the team, Craig Pollock, was replaced by Dave Richards, so the writing was on the wall for Jacques' time at BAR. 2002 and 2003 didn't yield the regular points the team wanted, and Villeneuve was out of the team after 2003. There have been rumours of him going back to IndyCar for 2003, but he stayed in F1 to try and prove to teams that he was still as good as he was in 1997. His naivety and lack of self-awareness left him without a seat for 2004, although with a few races to go, he would replace the outgoing Jarno Trulli at Renault in a competitive car, which Trulli had actually won in Monaco. Jacques never finished above 10th. Another year, even more underperformance. 2005 rolled around and a 34-year-old Jacques scored points 3 times, including a 4th in Imola due to Jenson Button's disqualification. He stayed on with the new BMW iteration of Sauber for 2006 and was under pressure to deliver as Polish youngster Robert Kubica was eyeing up a drive. Villeneuve scored 4 times in the opening parts of the season before crashing at Hockenheim, ruling him out of the next race in Hungary. Kubica performed admirably in Villeneuve's place and showed more promise in that one race than Villeneuve had in any of the previous 9 seasons. Sauber offered him a test session shootout with the pole, but Jacques felt that as a champion, he shouldn't have been fighting a rookie for his seat. Jacques, it's not 1997 anymore, said probably Peter Sauber. Thus confirmed Jacques' abrupt F1 retirement, although he expressed the interest to rejoin the F1 grid in 2010 with one of the new teams. That never happened, and many see him as an unworthy champion, although I disagree. Yes, his later career was a bit crap, and yes, he only just beat Schumi to a title in a much inferior car, but you've got to play the hand you're dealt, and Jacques did that. He said he never wanted to emulate his father, he just wanted to do for himself, and he did just that. Any driver who can win a championship is good. You can't fluke your way into one. And yes, maybe they weren't the best individual performer that season, but F1 isn't a meritocracy, otherwise it'd be a spec series. With that being said, Jacques is a worthy champion, although it's arguable there was much wasted potential he lost in his later years. Andretti was a jack-of-all-trades driver, competing in NASCAR, IndyCar, F1, sports cars, and probably many other disciplines, performing well in all. His surname is synonymous with speed, and his sons and grandsons still compete in motorsports today, but that's a lineage only matched by the likes of Fittipaldi and Earnhardt. If this list wasn't only about F1 achievements, he would be first. In his first F1 start in 1968, he qualified on pole for Lotus, but retired from a race with clutch issues. He stayed with Lotus for 69, retired from all 3 races he entered, scoring no points. 1970 saw him pick up his first podium in Spain with 3rd place, but he retired from all other races that season. The fact that he didn't compete full-time in F1 until 1975 really hampered his early years. He got his first win in South Africa in 1971 for Ferrari and finished 8th in that year's driver's standings. Ferrari were entering their slump, which meant Andretti scored just 4 points since 1972. He skipped 1973 in F1 entirely to do the USAC Championship, then returned in 1974 with Parnelli, the team which he did his F1 sabbatical with. He competed in just 2 races in 1974, not scoring points, but got 4th and 5th in Sweden and France in 1975 to get 5 points across the season. 1976 saw him get his big break with Team Lotus, picking up his first win and 2 other podiums in the late season to get 6th in the driver's standings. Why did I write that it was the first win in Fuji in the script when it wasn't? Because I'd literally just said that in South Africa he got his first win. I'm such an idiot sometimes. 1977 saw 4 wins in Long Beach, Jarama, Dijon and Monza on his way to 3rd in the driver's standings. 1978 was Mario's year, however. 6 wins, a 2nd place, a 4th and a 6th got him his only title. He was helped by the fact teammate and closest championship rival Ronnie Peterson died from injuries sustained in an accident at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, but nonetheless, Mario definitely deserved his championship crown. He stayed with Lotus for 1979 and 80 as they slumped thanks to Colin Chapman's shady behind-the-scenes dealings, and Mario switched to Alfa Romeo for 1981, having wanted actual decent results. He'd only achieved 1 podium in the previous 2 years and only 1 point in 1980. The now 41-year-old Mario kicked off the season with 4th at Long Beach, but wouldn't score in any of the remaining races. He went into semi-retirement for 1982, filling in for the recently retired Carlos Reutemann at Long Beach for Williams, although his performance was unspectacular. When Ferrari needed a late-season replacement for the injured Didier Pironi, Mario came to the help of a team which he had last raced for in F1 10 years prior. At Monza, his first race weekend in over 5 months, he put his Ferrari on pole position at the ripe old age of 42, becoming the 4th oldest pole sitter in F1 history, a record which still stands to this day. The oldest driver to start first since Jack Brabham in the 1970 Spanish Grand Prix. Mario finished 3rd that day, and at the season's final race he outqualified teammate Patrick Tambay, but retired from the race with suspension issues. And that was the end of Mario's F1 career. He would race in the IndyCar well into his 50s, then did sporadic Le Mans appearances, the last of which coming in 2000. He was one of the most adaptable drivers in an era where drivers did many different series. Maybe not so much in the latter part of his career, but definitely at the start. But my lack of knowledge of these series means that they don't count towards this ranking. However, if they did, he'll be number 1. Gilles Villeneuve nowadays is a footnote of F1 history, only truly appreciated by those embroiled in the history of F1 like myself, or those who are lucky enough to be alive when he did races. Gilles passed away in 1982, and it would be another 22 years before I was even born, but I can still appreciate his raw talent. Gilles' story is one of lost potential, one of what-ifs, and this does put a bit of an asterisk over his number 1 spot, but I think most will agree it's fitting to put him at the top. Following a non-championship event in Formula Atlantic, which saw Gilles beat several top-level F1 drivers, including reigning champion at that time, James Hunt, McLaren offered him a drive at the 1977 British Grand Prix. He would spin 10 times during practice, but qualified 9th in the race. In between regular drivers James Hunt and Jochen Mass, he only finished 11th, having lost 2 laps due to a faulty temperature gauge, but his potential was obvious. Weirdly though, McLaren team manager Teddy Mayer opted not to let him race a second time, saying that he would be a bit expensive. I mean, he would be correct further down the line, as Grand Prix winners tend to cost more to hire, but I don't think that's a train of thought he was using. Gilles signed with Ferrari late in 1977, with Enzo Ferrari, usually a cold and unflappable character, took a personal liking to Gilles because he reminded Enzo of the legendary pre-war racer Tazio Nuvolari. 1978 will be Gilles' breakout year, getting 3rd in Austria before winning in his home race at Canada to round off the season. The circuit Ile Notre Dame was later renamed after Gilles after he was the first Canadian driver to win the F1 Canadian Grand Prix in Canada whilst being Canadian. In 1979, Gilles would pick up 3 more wins, 4 second places and a 5th place and a pole position on his way to the runners-up spot, second to teammate Jody Scheckter. Sadly, 1980 saw Ferrari fall off a cliff in terms of performance. Their boxy and large flat 12 engines meant there was less room to create underfloor downforce through the use of Venturi tunnels and side skirts, and they plummeted from 1st to 10th in the Constructors, their worst ever placement in the Constructors' Championship. Modern fans often believe 2020 or even 2014 were the worst seasons in F1 history for Ferrari, but they don't even hold a candle to the bonfire that was the 1980 season. Jody only scored points once with a 5th in Long Beach, whereas Gilles dragged it to 4 points, scoring in races in Spa, Monaco, Hockenheim and Canada. 1981 saw another poor car from Ferrari, and new driver Didier Pironi got 9 points that season, with the best result of 4th. Fairly reasonable considering the car's performances last season. Gilles, on the other hand, won 2 races in Monaco and Jarama. Meanwhile, he got pole position and fastest lap in Imola. Admittedly, his Jarama win came about due to track position. He led a train of cars over the line, but that performance showed his defensive skill. 2 wins in a car that Didier, who was an amazing driver in his own right, couldn't even get a podium, is otherworldly. 1982 started with unfulfilled promise. Gilles scored 2 retirements and a disqualification from 3rd place due to an illegal rear wing in Long Beach. The story behind that illegal rear wing is potentially a story for another video, but Gilles got his first podium in Imola, although some believe it should have been a win, as vague team orders meant that Gilles thought the Ferrari pair were going to hold position during the race, whereas Didier Pironi, his teammate, thought that they were fighting for positions, but not to the point of crashing each other out. Didier overtook Gilles on the last lap to take the win, and Gilles was fuming on the podium, feeling betrayed, and he vowed never to speak with Pironi again. During qualifying for the next race in Zolder, Gilles went out for a run in such haste that he didn't do up his seatbelts properly. He crashed with Jochen Mass, his teammate during his first Grand Prix, and his car cartwheeled, launching him out of the car and into the catch fencing, dying later that day. He had so much lost potential, and many in racing circles believe he had a raw talent similar to the level of Jim Clark. But unlike Clark, didn't have the chance to win a championship or 2 before his untimely passing. Still, I think in his 5 years in Formula One, Gilles did enough to be crowned the best North American F1 driver in history. For a continent that only has 2 countries with F1 drivers from it, Oceania has a lot of motor racing legends etched into F1 history, and the 5th best driver from the continent wasn't just a pioneer behind the wheel, but was one of the first owner drivers in F1 to reach notoriety and achieve success in the car bearing his own name. The start of Bruce McLaren's F1 career isn't exactly concrete. During some races in the early days of Formula 1, the FIA would allow F2 cars to enter F1 races to bolster entry numbers, although they would not be eligible for championship points, and most sources do not count these F2 entries when considering driver profiles and their race start numbers. Bruce first entered a race in the 1958 German Grand Prix, the race in which Peter Collins was killed in a crash. McLaren finished 5th on the road, which at the time was worth 2 points, but being in an F2 car meant he didn't get those 2 points. He also finished 13th in the season-ending Moroccan Grand Prix that year, but that was also in an F2 car. For 1959, he joined the main Cooper team. After 2 points finishes in Monaco and Rennes, Bruce achieved his first podium with 3rd in Aintree. Then after consecutive retirements, he took his first win in Sebring. A brilliant debut season if you don't count his 2 F2 entries, and a great sophomore campaign if you do count them. 1960 would bear more fruit, winning the season opener in Buenos Aires, then following that up with a 2nd place in Monaco. Then during the rest of the season, McLaren got 2 more 2nd places and 2 more 3rds along with a 4th. He finished 2nd in the Drivers' Championship to Jack Brabham. 1961 saw him pick up just a sole podium in Monza on the combined layout of the circuit. 1962 saw his results pick up with a win in Monaco, a 2nd place in South Africa, and 3 3rds in Aintree, Monza and Watkins Glen, to finish 3rd in the drivers' standings. He had another dip in 1963, only picking up 3 podiums in Monaco, Spa and Monza. He finished 6th in the drivers' standings, but the slump continued for the next 2 seasons in 64 and 65, as he only got 3 podiums combined in both seasons, with a 2nd and a 3rd in Spa in consecutive years and a 2nd in Monza. McLaren decided to try and rectify his slump by starting his own eponymous team, along with fellow Kiwi Chris Amon. After 2 shaky seasons in 1966 and 1967, which saw him pick up only 6 points and not finish any race higher than 4th, McLaren broke through in 1968, winning in Spa for the first time in 6 years, and then he got 2 2nd places in Mont Tremblant and Mexico to finish 5th in the driver's standings. He finished 3rd in the 1969 standings despite not winning any races. His best results were a 2nd in Montjuic and 2 3rds in Silverstone and the Nürburgring. After starting off his 1970 season with a 2nd in Jarama alongside 2 retirements, he was killed driving a Can-Am car at Goodwood after the bodywork failed. McLaren was 32 when he died, and his team survives to this day as one of the last remaining privateers in Formula 1. He had potential to achieve more, but truth be told, Bruce was a very good driver in an era of true greats and icons and would have struggled to win a title even with the best of luck. Mark Webber is remembered fondly amongst those who watched him during his F1 career. Known as a warrior on track, the embodiment of Aussie grit, he joined Minardi in 2002 with help from Australian team owner Paul Stoddart, and after a minor collision on lap 1, which eliminated a few cars or so, Mark finished 5th on his debut in a Minardi, and he was allowed onto the podium to celebrate after the race. In true no-nonsense fashion, Mark later said in his autobiography that he didn't deserve to celebrate on the podium that day because he didn't get a top 3 finish, and it took away from the actual podium finishers on that day. I mean, he's got a point. Well, actually 2 points if you want to be pedantic. He didn't get any more points for the rest of the season, but he comprehensively beat teammates Anthony Davidson and Alex Young, although beating the latter is about as hard as Ayrton Senna's penis when he sees a woman who's of age. He moved to Jaguar for 2003 and had, again, an easy teammate, this time Antonio Pizzonia, although he was replaced mid-season by a promising Justin Wilson. Webber outscored his 2 teammates by a combined 17-1 points. He stayed with Jaguar for 2004, although in an unreliable and uncompetitive car, he scored a meagre 7 points. For 2005, Williams signed Webber up, releasing Giancarlo Fisichella, who had a provisional contract with the team, and Webber achieved his first podium in Monaco, along with many other point-scoring finishes to finish a joint career-best 10th place in the driver's standings. He got another dose of second-season syndrome in 2006, as Williams fell off just like Jaguar did, and Mark again only scored 7 points. In 2007, he switched to the up-and-coming Red Bull team. His relative experience, along with David Coulthard in the other seat, would help with development of the car. He only scored points 3 times, although one of those finishes was a third place and a podium at the chaotic European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. 2008 saw more consistent point scoring, and then 2009 saw Webber get his big break. A breakthrough pole position and win at the Nürburgring saw Marc take his first win after 130 race starts, and his elation on the team radio after the race represented 7 years of struggling in uncompetitive machinery finally ending in a team where he could show his true talents. He scored a second win in Brazil and finished the season 4th in standings behind his teammate and both Brawn GP drivers. 2010 was a year of what-ifs for Marc. He took 5 pole positions across the season, and he led the drivers' standings after the summer break in Hungary, and in a chaotic season like 2010, he could surely clinch the title if he constantly churned out good results. Something else to note, in recent years, many fans have pointed out how sometimes they perceived number 2 driver in a given team is forgotten about or neglected during races to benefit the team leader. These types of drivers include Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes or Sergio Perez in Red Bull. However, regardless of however they are treated, they are usually given the chance to fight on a level playing field with their teammate, so that occasionally they might outperform a number 1 driver. That's not how it went for Webber in 2010. By the time of the British Grand Prix, Webber had achieved 2 wins and sat 4th in the drivers' standings behind the McLarens of Hamilton and Button and behind his teammate Sebastian Vettel. Although Vettel was ahead, it was only by 12 points, and Marc had been plagued with bad luck early in the season. During one of the practice sessions in Silverstone, Vettel's front wing failed coming up to Abbey Corner and was therefore unusable for the rest of the weekend. Red Bull had brought a front wing upgrade to the race and only had 2 new front wings available. With one wing now gone, Webber's was the only one remaining. But Christian Horner took a leaf out of Alain Prost's book entitled How to Alienate One of Your Drivers and Make Them Feel Like They're Not Wanted handbook. Horner decided to move Webber's newer wing onto Vettel's car and give Marc an old spec wing instead. Considering he did this following the race in Turkey where the 2 Red Bull drivers collided fighting for the win, in an incident now widely perceived as being Seb's fault, Marc was livid and publicly stated that he thought the team was favouring Vettel. I mean, it's pretty obvious. In the biggest fuck you team moment in F1 history, Webber qualified second to Vettel, but a well-timed safety car put Vettel down the order. With a clear track in front of him, Marc won with Seb 7th, and in one of the most famous lines in team radio history, he said, "Not bad for a number 2 driver." What a guy. Later in the season, Marc held the lead with 3 rounds to go, but in what is now seen as the point where the championship swung out of Webber's favour, he spun in the pouring rain of the Korean Grand Prix and was collected by Nico Rosberg, which forced him into race retirement. Despite the trials and tribulations of the 2010 season, Marc went into Abu Dhabi, the season finale, with a reasonable chance to win the title. He was second in the standings, 8 points behind Fernando Alonso and 7 ahead of teammate Vettel. A scary early crash between Michael Schumacher and Vitantonio Liuzzi brought out the safety car and many drivers pitted. Webber pitted early along with Alonso, and they were both stuck behind a slow Vitaly Petrov for the entire race, as the Russian didn't need to pit again as he is pitted under the safety car. Webber and Alonso lost the title to Vettel and it was agonising. To lose a title to your teammate is bad. To lose due to factors out of your control is doubly bad. To lose a title due to systematic favouritism from your team, well, that's just a slap in the face. Had Red Bull not swept Istanbul under the rug, or done what they did in Silverstone, or fought ahead in Abu Dhabi, Webber would have won the title. Maybe it's unfair to discuss what Webber's what-ifs were without analysing the same conditions for your title contenders, but it's undeniable that Marc deserved that title more than Seb. As much as Seb was great, he was very lucky. The teammate dynamic would be non-existent going into 2011. In 2011, Sebastian Vettel would have one of his best seasons of his career, winning 11 races on the way to a dominant title, the biggest points gap second in the championship ever at that time. Now, I could put on my tinfoil hat and say that the reason Marc only got 1 win and third in the driver's standings was because of Red Bull favouritism, but realistically that probably wasn't the case. 11 wins to 1 and a 134 point gap probably can't be explained away by team dynamics. Also, despite only 1 win, Marc got 3 pole positions, so he had clearly had the outright pace to win. In 2012, Marc would have a small resurgence, winning Monaco from pole position and the race in Silverstone after fighting off Fernando Alonso. We wouldn't know it at the time, but that would be Marc's last win in Formula 1. After finishing 6th and well off Vettel in the driver's standings in 2012, 2013 would be dominated by one thing: Multi-21. Marc was leading the Malaysian Grand Prix when Seb was catching him, but in order to preserve an early season Multi finish, the team went over the radio to Seb, telling him to hold position. Mark was probably shocked that the team didn't expect him to roll out the red carpet for Seb and let him through, but Seb didn't listen. He overtook Mark after an incredible side-by-side battle through the snaily 1 turn 2 and 3 section, and Mark was livid. Seb said he didn't understand the radio message in a later interview, but Mark was livid. In the cool-down room after the race, he repeated the phrase, multi-21 Seb. But Seb was nonchalant. Drive to Survive fans really don't know how much of a cockhen Seb was in his Red Bull days. Mark would take pole twice towards season end, but wouldn't win in a car that took Seb to 13 wins and 9 in a row. He retired at season's end, obviously fed up of Seb being the golden boy in the team, and bear in mind he was 37 at this point, which isn't ancient, but it's not young either. Mark retired with 9 wins to his name, definitely one of the best drivers never to win a title, and pushed throughout his career by sheer determination. He is now Oscar Piastri's manager and is clearly helping him to have a solid rookie season, developing as a driver and as a person too. Alan Jones started his F1 career in 1975 with Harry Stiller Racing, a very small junior series outfit, which brought up a Hesketh chassis, which would win that season at Zandvoort in the hands of James Hunt. Jones, however, didn't get the same results, finishing only the Swedish Grand Prix in 11th. He switched team to Embassy Hill and ran 4 races with them, scoring a 5th place in the German Grand Prix at the fearsome Nürburgring Nordschleife circuit. His first full-time season would come with Team Surtees, which was sponsored by Durex. Despite the backing and protection the sponsor brought them, they couldn't come quickly if it saved their lives. And Jones only scored points in 3 races, in Zolder, Brands Hatch, and the season finale in Fuji. The conditions in Fuji were so wet and slippery that Durex really came into play. Puns aside, Jones moved to Shadow Racing in 1977 after the untimely passing of Tom Price in South Africa, and Shadow was a team that had only finished the highest of 6th in the Constructors' Championship up to this point. He missed the first 3 rounds, but after consecutive 6th and 5th place finishes in Monaco and Zolder early on in this season, Jones won the Austrian Grand Prix at the Österreich Ring. This was his first win, and the only win for the Shadow team. He would round out the season with a podium in Monza and then 2 4th places in Montreal and Fuji to end the season, finishing 7th in the driver's standings on 22 points, when his smattering of teammates scored a combined 1 point, courtesy of Renzo Zorzi in Brazil. For 1978, Jones moved to Williams. Nowadays, or in any season post-1979, anyone joining Williams will be joining a race-winning and later a multiple-time championship-winning outfit with lots of success and experience. However, this was not the Williams that Jones joined. He joined a 1-year-old Williams team that had a customer March chassis the year prior and only ran 1 driver all year. For Jones' arrival, they did have their own chassis named the FW06, and Alan scored points 3 times, including taking a 2nd place and podium in Watkins Glen late in the season. He finished 11th in the driver's standings on 11 points, and the first time in his F1 career, he decided to stay with a team for more than 1 season. 1979 saw Williams debut their FW07 chassis at the Spanish Grand Prix, having already taken 3rd in the United States Grand Prix West with the old chassis. After taking 4th place in Dijon-Prenois, Jones retired from a lead in Silverstone after qualifying on pole, with teammate Clay Regazzoni taking Williams' first ever win. Jones clearly took that personally, as he proceeded to win 4 of the next 5 races, then retired from the season finale in Watkins Glen from a lead. He finished the season 3rd in the driver's standings on 40 points, 11 clear of Regazzoni. 1980 saw Jones come of age. He won the season-opening Argentine Grand Prix from pole before taking 3rd in the next race in Brazil. Consecutive retirements in South Africa and the US Grand Prix West at Long Beach were followed up by 2nd place in Brazil. Consecutive retirements in South Africa and the US Grand Prix West at the Long Beach were followed up by 2nd place in Zolder from pole position. He retired in Monaco but won the next 2 races in Paul Ricard and Brands Hatch, taking his championship lead to 6 points over Nelson Piquet. He then got pole and 3rd place in Hockenheim for the German Grand Prix, then finished 2nd twice in 3 races in Austria and in Imola for the Italian Grand Prix. Going into the last 2 races, it was Piquet who held the points lead by just a 1 point, and it would take a strong end to the season from Jones to beat the resurgent Brazilian. Jones would win both of the final 2 races in Canada and the final ever F1 race held at Watkins Glen. He won the title by 13 points over Piquet, and Jones became Williams' first ever world champion at 34 years old, and then followed that season up with an impressive 1981 campaign which saw him bookend the seasons with 2 wins in the US at Long Beach and Las Vegas, along with 4 other podiums which led him to 3rd in the driver's standings. He retired at season's end, but nearly came out of retirement when Ferrari lost Didier Pironi to a career-ending injury late in the 1982 season. Jones differed on making a decision, so they gave the drive to fellow champion Mario Andretti. Jones did make a comeback in 1983 with Arrows for one race at Long Beach, out-qualifying teammate Mark Sura after a season and a bit out of an F1 car, although he retired from a race with fatigue, which was potentially caused by falling off a horse a few months prior. Jones sat out in 1984, but then in late 1985, aged 38, he signed for Haas. This is the original Haas F1 team, often known as Beatrice Haas, Haas Lola, or Carl Haas, to differentiate from its modern-day counterpart. Jones later admitted he only joined the team because of the healthy paycheck, but after a shaky start in 85, then an even shakier start to the 86 season, which saw Jones only finish 3 of the first 11 races, he scored a 4th in Austria and a 6th in Monza, even though he was nearly 40 years old. His 4 points put him 12th in the driver's standings, but he retired properly from F1 at season's end. He would retire to Australia soon after, where he would race in V8 supercars until 2002, when he retired aged 56. He was certainly a talented and consistent driver in an era of rapid car development in F1. He may have stopped full-time driving a bit soon, but when his Haas car decided it wanted to finish a race, he was still scoring points until the end of his career in F1. He's a legend in Williams and in F1 history, although you'd be pushed to find a newer fan who can tell you anything about his achievements. I initially put Denny Hulme below Alan Jones on this list, but I later changed my mind. After a promising few years in junior series and sports cars, driving for Jack Brabham's F2 team in the former, Hulme made his F1 championship debut in the 1965 Monaco Grand Prix. One strange footnote is that in his early career, Denny often raced barefoot in order to feel the pedals better, which sounds like a ridiculous proposition today to anyone who doesn't do sim racing. He qualified 1.7 seconds off at the time double world champion teammate Jack Brabham, then finished 8th, 8 laps down. I guess you've got to start somewhere. In his next race at the amazing Charade circuit, Hulme finished 4th and scored his first career points. He would retire in 3 of his other 4 entries that year, although he finished in Zandvoort in 5th place. These results got him 5 championship points and 11th in the drivers' standings. Brabham kept the Kiwi on for 1966, and after consecutive retirements in Monaco and Spa, then he got his first career podium in Rennes at the French Grand Prix. Then followed this up with a 2nd place at Brands Hatch the race after. He would then get another 2 consecutive retirements in Zandvoort and in Germany, but then got 2 third places in the final 3 races in Monza and in Mexico City. These 4 podiums put Hulme in 4th place in the Drivers' Championship at the end of the season. He again stayed with Brabham in 1967 and would have won the season-opening South African race at Kyalami if he didn't have to pit for more brake fluid after leading the first 59 laps, and he crossed the line in 4th. Hulme then won his first race at the next round in Monaco, beating Mr. Monaco himself, Graham Hill, by a full lap. He then scored a 3rd place in Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix, meaning he now had led the championship by 5 points. Hulme retired on lap 14 in Spa due to engine trouble, will take 4 podiums in the next 4 races, with 3 second-place finishes at the Le Mans Bugatti circuit, Silverstone and Mosport, and also a win at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. These impressive results put Hulme top of the driver's standings with a 9-point gap to 2nd place, teammate Jack Brabham with 3 races remaining. A retirement in Monza for Denny and a 2nd place for Brabham bought the Oz within 3 points of his Kiwi teammate, with 2 rounds left. A 3rd place for Denny when Jack could only muster 5th in Watkins Glen, meant Denny only needed a 4th place at the season finale in Mexico to guarantee the title. He duly finished 3rd and stopped Jack Brabham getting a 2nd title in his own chassis, getting his own title instead by 5 points. 1968 saw Hulme switch to McLaren, and after an early season which saw numerous point-scoring finishes with 3 5th places in Kyalami, Monaco and Rouen, a 4th place in Brands Hatch, and a 2nd place in Girama, Denny would achieve 2 race wins towards season's end, at Monza and Mont-Tremblant, before retiring in the races in the US and Mexico. These results put him 3rd in the drivers' standings by the end of the season. 1969 saw less success, but there were still high points. He got just the 1 win at Mexico and 1 3rd place at Kyalami, along with 2 4th places in Montjuic at Zandvoort and 6th in Monaco. 1970 was a dark year for the McLaren team, losing Bruce McLaren after a crash at Goodwood killed him. Denny also suffered burns to his hands from following a methanol fire while practicing for the Indy 500. After a 2nd place in Kyalami, once Denny returned for the French Grand Prix following his burns, he would achieve 3 3rd places before season's end at Brands Hatch, Hockenheim and Mexico. He also got 2 4th places at Charade and Monza. 1971 would see Denny's first podium-less season since his debut in 1965. He did, however, get 2 4th places in Monaco and in Mosport, along with a 5th in Montjuic and 6th in Kyalami. 1972 saw Denny have a small resurgence aged 36, starting off the season with second in Buenos Aires and a win in Kyalami. After a dithering mid-season which only saw a third place in Belgium at the Nivelles Baller circuit and a fifth place at Brands Hatch, Denny performed well at the end of the season, taking 4 podiums in the final 4 races, with second in Brands Hatch, with second in Austria and 3 consecutive third places in Monza, Mosport and Watkins Glen. These impressive results put him third in the Drivers' Championship. Then in 1973, he started off the season with a 5th in Argentina, then a 3rd in Brazil for the first Brazilian Grand Prix. After that, he finished in 5th from pole position in South Africa. Also, something else of note, that pole position in South Africa was his first and only pole position in his Formula 1 career. Yes, you're right. Before that pole, Denny had achieved a world title, 30 podiums and 6 wins without getting any pole positions. He got 2 sixth places in Monaco and Monaco before winning the Swedish Grand Prix and then getting 3rd in Silverstone. It was 6 more races until he got another points finish with 4th at the season finale in the United States, and he got 6th in the Drivers' Championship that year. 1974 will be Denny's final year in F1. After winning the Argentine Grand Prix to start the season, at the 3rd round in Kyalami, he witnessed the fatal crash of Peter Revson, which raised his fears about safety and thus prompted him to retire at season's end. He got 5 sixth-place finishes that year at Jarama, Nivelles Ballers, Dijon, Monza and Mosport. He was also disqualified from the German Grand Prix at the Nordschleife for driving in the spare car after retiring. His last ever podium came at the Österreichring with a 2nd place, and after his retirement from F1, he would compete in the Bathurst 1000 numerous times until he died from a heart attack while racing in the 1992 edition of the Bathurst race. He was the first F1 world champion to die of natural causes. Every champion before had either died at the wheel of a racing car, died in a road accident, or in a plane crash. Denny may have had a rugged racing style, but it clearly worked as he had much success in F1 and in other series. Jack Brabham, just like the previously mentioned Bruce McLaren, was a pioneer on and off track. He became the 2nd Australian to enter an F1 race after Tony Gaze entered 4 races in 1952. Brabham's first 2 F1 races came in consecutive British Grand Prix in 1955 and 56 at Aintree and Silverstone respectively, although he retired from both races with engine issues after qualifying last for both. 1957 saw Jack enter multiple races in the season for the first time, entering 5 races throughout the year, getting 6th in Monaco and 7th in Rouen. And at the Pescara Grand Prix, a race in which Brabham was running out of fuel midway through the 25-kilometre lap, he pulled into a trackside petrol station and filled up. I wonder if he paid for it before he rejoined the race. He also retired from his 3rd successive British Grand Prix and the German race at the Nordschleife. But then, Jack would score his first points during the 1958 season, with a 4th place finish at the first race of the season in Monaco. He finished 5 of the races, getting 2 sixth places in Jaén and Silverstone, and 7th in Boa Vista for the Portuguese Grand Prix, an 8th in Zandvoort and an 11th place in Monaco, albeit in an F2 car. 1959 would continue to provide a few points here and there for Jack, as the Cooper was still uncompetitive. Psych. Jack won the first race of the season in Monaco with fastest lap. Then at the next round in Zandvoort, he took 2nd, then 3rd in Rem, then another win in Aintree. He had almost double the points tally of 2nd place Tony Brooks after Aintree, then retired from the next 2 races consecutively, which allowed Brooks to close the gap to 4 points. However, a 3rd in Monaco and 4th in Sebring would help him claim the World Drivers' Championship. He actually would have won the Sebring race had he not run out of fuel and had to push his car over the line. But nonetheless, he won the 1959 title after only having scored points once in his career before the season. The start of the 1960 season didn't go well for Jack, however. He retired from the opening race in Argentina and was disqualified from the race in Monaco due to receiving outside assistance. I assume that must have been some rules banning engineers from giving drivers help over the team radio. Or maybe he spun out and got a push. I think the radio option is more likely given the era of F1 we're in. He would then go on a mad winning streak, winning the Dutch, Belgian, French, British and Portuguese races on the bounce, getting 5 wins in a row, 3 from pole position and 2 with fastest laps. Only 16 cars started the next race in Monza, as the Italian race was boycotted by all major teams bar Ferrari, and the rest of the grid was filled with privateers, because the drivers and teams feared that racing on the combined layout of Monza, which included the banked oval, was too dangerous. This meant obviously that Jack didn't start the race, but because his teammate Bruce McLaren didn't either, Jack would be world champion provided he got 1 point in the season finale at Riverside, even if McLaren won. McLaren came only 3rd, which guaranteed Brabham's title, but Jack still finished 4th, meaning he won the title by 9 points to Bruce due to the drop scores rule, meaning McLaren dropped 3 points while Jack dropped none. Jack went into 1961 as a two-time world champion, one of only three such drivers in F1 history at that time, along with Ascari and Fangio. After the highs of 1959 and 1960, it all came crashing down harder than Davey Allison and Alan Kulwicki. In 1961, as Jack only got 4 points from a 6th in the Netherlands and a 4th in Aintree, retiring from all other races, although he did get a pole position in the season finale at Watkins Glen. For 1962, he founded his own racing team, Brabham. After using a Lotus chassis to get 6th in Spa and 5th in Aintree, the first Brabham chassis, the BT3, was introduced mid-season, in which Jack scored 2 fourth places in Watkins Glen and in South Africa at the Prince George circuit. He ended the season in 9th place in the driver's standings on 9 points. 1963 saw more promise as he scored 2 fourth places in Chem and Watkins Glen, along with a 5th in Monza. A 2nd place in the Mexican Grand Prix helped him get 7th in the driver's standings, with 14 points for the 1963 season. The 1964 season would see good but inconsistent results, with 2 early season 3rd places in Spa and Rouen, and a 4th place in Brands Hatch showing promise, but then Brabham would fail to reach a checkered flag in all of the remaining 5 races, including in Zeltweg and Monza, where he was 29 and 19 laps down respectively, but was still classified in the race results. The team stagnated in 1965 as Brabham only got 1 more podium in Watkins Glen on his way to 10th in the driver's standings on 9 points. Seemingly out of nowhere, just like in 1959, Brabham's team skyrocketed in performance. The now 40-year-old would get 4th in Spa before winning 4 consecutive races in Chem, Brands Hatch, Zandvoort and at the Nordschleife, winning from pole at Brands and Zandvoort. Retirements from the lead in Monza and Watkins Glen meant 2nd place in the standings. Jock and Rindt was 17 points off Brabham in an era where a win was only worth 9. Brabham secured his 3rd title further by coming 2nd in Mexico to wrap up his 3rd crown, becoming the 2nd 3-time champion after Fangio did so in 1955. In 1967, now aged 41, Brabham would take on Denny Hulme for the title, eventually losing out by 5 points, despite taking 2 wins at the Le Mans Bugatti circuit and at Mosport, and 4 second places in Zandvoort, the Nürburgring, Monza and Mexico. 1968 would see Jack slip down the order again, only finishing 2 races in Germany and Mexico, where he scored 2 points for 5th place in the former. 1969 saw some impressive results as Jack qualified on pole twice, in both the first race in Kyalami and in the last race of the season at Mexico. He scored 14 points, courtesy of great late-season form, which saw him take a 2nd place in Mosport, 4th in Watkins Glen and 3rd in Mexico. He seemed to still be a top-level driver well into his 40s as he started in 1970 with a bang. A win in the first season at Kyalami was followed by a pole position in Jarama and a 2nd place in Monaco, which could have been a win had he not messed up the gasworks hairpin in the final lap while defending from Jock and Rindt. A 44-year-old Brabham was leading the driver's standings at this point of the season, although bad results in the next 2 races, with a retirement at the last race held at the Old Spa circuit, and an 11th place finish at Zandvoort dropped into 3rd in the standings. 3rd at Sherrard and 2nd at Brands Hatch brought him up to 2nd place behind the runaway Jock and Rindt, but Brabham retired from 4 of the final 6 races of the season, failing to score in the other 2, meaning he tumbled to 6th in the driver's standings. Still, a win, a pole position, and 3 other podiums aged 44 was bloody impressive. He retired at the end of 1970, having promised his wife he would do so a year or 2 prior, and he would continue to dabble in motorsport, and his sons David and Gary would also drive in F1. David was fairly impressive despite being lauded with terrible machinery, and Gary turned out to be a child sex offender after his short stint with Life F1 in 1990. Brabham remains a name embedded in F1 history, even if the team bearing Jack's surname fell off the grid in 1992, and Jack is a legend of motorsport. And with that, that's the end of the video. This is post-editing me because I forgot to make an outro. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening to this first part of a new video after I've had my little break. And I'm now back. I'll be posting part 2 either this or next week. Depends on how I can get the other video edited quickly. And then I'll be working on Ranking Champions part 2 as well at the same time. If you'd like to contact me directly rather than just in the YouTube comments, you can go and follow my Instagram. It's f1.hotties. And what else can I say? I don't know what. I'm just waffling at this point in the video. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you all later. Bye.